When I was 12, my mother had just begun to trust me enough to stay home by myself. This must have been when I was 12. We reside in a calm and typically secure small town. The streets are quiet, the yards are large, the neighbors are kind, and there's a quaint village nearby with shops and eateries. It's not a place where you feel the need to watch your back at night when walking alone. That sense of safety is partly why my parents felt okay leaving me home alone at such a young age. I still live with my parents in the same house today. That particular night was a weekend, and my parents were leaving me home alone for the evening. When my sister and I were younger, our grandparents would look after us. But since my sister wasn't around that night for some reason, and I was deemed old enough to manage on my own, my parents decided to let me stay by myself. My parents had us when they were young, so they've always been more outgoing, often going on trips or hanging out with friends on weekends. They left me some cash to order pizza for dinner. It was the perfect night for a 12 or 13-year-old. An empty house, video games all night, and pizza for dinner. As a kid, I was hooked on James Bond video games. That night, I was playing a game called Nightfire, probably my third time through it, on my PlayStation 2. After finishing the game again, I decided to order the pizza. There was a pizzeria close to our house called Johnny's. It shut down years ago, but back then it was a family favorite. I ordered a standard pizza. At 12, I could easily polish off 3 slices on my own. My mom instructed me to wrap the remaining slices in foil and store them in the fridge. While waiting for the pizza, I swapped discs to play another video game. When the doorbell rang, I rushed downstairs with the $20 bill my parents had left. My mom told me to tip $4. The pizza place was just 3 blocks away, so it was a decent tip for the time. The delivery guy looked like he was in his 30s. He seemed a bit scruffy, with a long, unkempt beard. He wore glasses and a black trucker's cap. I handed him the $20 and asked for the exact change. As he passed me the pizza box and counted out the change, he glanced at me, then peered past me into the house and asked, "You here by yourself?" I knew it was a strange and unsettling question, and my parents had taught me to be cautious around strangers. I replied that my parents were on their way back. Looking back, it was a dumb response. I could have just said no. But I figured he asked because there were no cars in the driveway, and a kid was answering the door instead of an adult. After he gave me the change, I shut the door. I ate in the kitchen, probably had 3 slices, then wrapped up the leftovers and put them in the fridge. I headed back upstairs to play another James Bond PS2 game, Agent Under Fire. I enjoyed it less than Nightfire, but it was still fun. Hours passed as I played. It was likely around 11 p.m. when the doorbell rang again. Thinking it was my parents, I hurried downstairs to the door. I called out, "Mom? Dad?" But an unfamiliar voice answered, "Hey, I need help. I need to use a phone." I asked, "Who's there?" He repeated that he just needed a phone. I didn't dare peek through the window because, honestly, I was terrified. I decided to head upstairs and ignore it. I knew from basic common sense that opening the door would be an awful idea. As I climbed the stairs, which faced the front door, the man outside banged on it and said, "Wait, please, I need help." That meant he'd seen me. He was looking through the glass panel at the top of the door. I turned, and though the porch was dark, I could make out the shape of his head. I couldn't see his eyes, but it felt like he was staring right at me. I bolted upstairs to my parents' room. The only upstairs phone was in their bedroom, so I grabbed it and dialed my mom's cell number. I didn't know my dad's number by heart back then. My mom answered, probably a bit tipsy from a few glasses of wine. I told her someone was at the door asking to come in. That must have snapped her out of it. Her voice changed instantly, becoming louder and more serious. She asked a few questions. First, she wanted to know if I'd responded to the man or let him know I was home. I admitted I had, saying I asked who he was. Her tone grew more worried. She asked if anyone might know I was alone. I immediately thought of the pizza delivery guy. I told her he'd asked if I was by myself. Around then, the doorbell rang twice more. I told my mom in a panic that the guy wouldn't leave. She told me to stay in their room and lock the door. She said they were calling the police. My mom kept me on the line while they used my dad's phone to contact the authorities. They had to step outside the restaurant they were at to hear better. It was a summer night, and the windows were slightly open to let in some air. Through my parents' window, I heard the gate on one side of the house leading to the backyard creak open. It was a soft, careful sound. I told my mom, and she kept urging me to stay quiet, stay in their room, and keep the lights off. I whispered into the phone, "What if he tries to get in through the den window?" My mom told me to stop talking and wait for the police. She kept updating me on the police's ETA and reminded me to stay silent. I was starting to calm down slightly when I heard unmistakable footsteps downstairs. Someone was inside the house moving around. I whispered this to my mom in a panic, and I heard her yell something into the other phone, likely telling the police the intruder was inside. My mom told me to hide under the bed and stay there. For my 12-year-old self, it was the most terrifying, surreal moment of my life. The only thing making me feel somewhat safe was the small lock on my parents' bedroom door. I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. The staircase is near my sister's and my bedroom's down the hall. My parents' room is farther along. The footsteps paused for a moment, probably as the intruder checked our bedrooms. My mom said the police would force their way in and told me to stay put until they arrived. I heard the footsteps move down the hall toward the bedroom door, then the doorknob rattled as he tried to open it, finding it locked. He tried a few more times as if persistence would unlock it. Then there was a soft knock on the door, but the person didn't say anything. He tried the knob once more before I heard footsteps retreating down the hall, then down the stairs, fading deeper into the house. I fought back tears the whole time. I didn't even whisper into the phone, too scared to make any noise. My mom eventually said the police had arrived, but told me to stay where I was. I expected to hear them force the door open, but instead, I suddenly heard several heavy footsteps and a man calling my name, identifying himself as a police officer. They were coming up the stairs, and my mom gave me the okay to respond and unlock the door. When I opened it, 2 officers were upstairs, with 2 more downstairs. They didn't need to break down the front door because the back door was wide open. The sliding window in the den was also fully open, clearly how someone got in. I had to explain everything to the police, including my suspicion about the pizza delivery guy, with my parents listening over the phone. They were on their way home, and by the time they arrived, only 2 officers remained. The police report noted the pizza guy, and they said they'd look into it. The next evening, my parents took me to Gianni's Pizzeria and asked me to identify the delivery guy if I saw him. When I didn't spot him, they asked the manager about an employee matching the description I gave. He said it sounded like Phil, who was out on a delivery. After we explained the situation, the manager insisted it couldn't be Phil and told us to leave. Long story short, my parents caused a scene, vowing never to return. We went to the car and waited in the parking lot. We sat there for nearly an hour, but he never showed. My parents suspected the manager tipped off the employee, which might have kept him away, but who knows? They reached out to a few lawyers, but none took the case, citing insufficient evidence and calling it a waste of time. In the end, we never went back to that pizzeria. It took a long time for my parents to feel comfortable leaving me home alone again because of this incident. I'm convinced it was the pizza guy or someone connected to him. Who else would have known I was alone that night? Years later, as a teenager, my parents and I moved from California to a remote part of North Idaho. My parents had retired and built their dream home deep in the wilderness. There were no neighbors, just thick forest stretching endlessly, bordering national parkland and logging grounds owned by a paper mill. The house was huge, 2 stories with a gym, a full bar and billiards room, and a legitimate home theater in the basement. It felt like a fantasy home. Isolated, serene, perfect, or so I thought. I was dating my high school girlfriend at the time. One night, while my parents were out on a date in town, I invited her over to watch a movie. We were completely alone. I grabbed a beer, underage, but I figured no one would mind, and we went to the theater room to watch Gladiator. Everything was fine at first, but around halfway through, close to midnight, something shifted. Out of nowhere, I felt a surge of panic, like my instincts were screaming at me. My heart raced, and I kept glancing at the bare windows behind us, which faced the dark woods. I didn't want to scare my girlfriend, so I kept it to myself. Things even got a bit romantic during the movie, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching us. I wasn't sure from where, but I felt it. After the movie, I walked her upstairs to her car. The house was silent again. She drove away, and I turned to head back inside. Then I remembered I'd left the lights on in the bar, billiards room, and theater. So I went downstairs. I switched off the theater room lights first, then stopped. My gaze drifted to the large window facing the backyard, and that's when I saw him. He looked like a vagrant. Messy hair, ragged clothes, but what stopped me cold was his face. He had the widest, most unsettling grin I'd ever seen, with wild, unhinged eyes. In his hand was a knife. He was lightly tapping it against the glass, again and again. At first, I thought I was imagining it. I backed away slowly and moved to the bar room to turn off the remaining lights. That room has a sliding glass door facing the woods. I flipped the switch and watched in terror as the man calmly walked from the window to the door, still grinning, still staring. We were inches apart, separated only by the glass. He didn't try to enter. He didn't move. He just watched me. I went upstairs without a word. Just then, my parents walked in. I told them I thought I needed a doctor or something because I'd just seen a guy with a knife staring at me outside. My mom's face went white. My dad's expression hardened. And without a word, he went to the gun safe, grabbed his rifle, and went outside to check the property. I asked my mom what was happening, and she said there'd been a few break-ins nearby. A man wandering the woods, trying to get into houses. The description I gave matched perfectly. The police were called, but they found nothing. No signs of forced entry, no footprints, just dark, cold woods. That should have been the end, but it wasn't. That night, as I tried to sleep, I heard a faint tapping sound below me. My bedroom was on the second floor, right above the theater room. It sounded like metal gently hitting glass. I told myself it was nothing. The tapping went on for hours. This continued night after night, for weeks. Sometimes it stopped. Other times, I'd wake up at 3 a.m. to hear it faintly again. One night, I even thought I heard footsteps on the roof. I checked the windows but never saw anyone. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, stalked. Then winter arrived. My parents had to leave town for a few days, but they were still uneasy about what had happened. Before they left, they gave me a shotgun for protection. We also had a big Rottweiler, the sweetest dog, silent unless something was truly there. One night, while I was alone, I heard slow, crunching footsteps in the snow outside. Heavy, deliberate steps. The dog stood up, ears alert, and began growling deeply at the front door. Then he started barking. Loud, ferocious, relentless. He only did that when he sensed something real. I stayed quiet. I didn't want whoever was out there to know I was home. I didn't move. Then came a knock, slow, hollow, almost mocking. I didn't answer. I slept with the shotgun beside me that night, doors locked, blinds closed, dog at my feet. The next morning, I went outside and saw something that made my blood run cold. Footprints. Fresh, human footprints circled the entire house. They stopped at every window, as if someone was peering in, looking for me. I followed the tracks around the property, and they led into the forest. I followed them for maybe half a mile before they began to zigzag, loop back, and veer off, like whoever made them was trying to confuse me. I turned back. Something told me going farther was a bad idea. That night, the tapping returned, louder than before. I was certain it was him. I unlocked my door, grabbed my shotgun, and stepped onto the second-floor balcony. I switched on the floodlights that lit up the backyard. There he stood, the same man, with the same eerie grin and lifeless eyes. He held the knife again, staring straight at me like he could see into my soul. I raised the shotgun and yelled, "Leave now or I'll shoot!" He didn't budge or blink, just kept staring, smiling. I fired a warning shot near him and finally he reacted. He stumbled slightly, then slowly retreated into the woods, still facing me. That's when I decided to release the dog. I raced downstairs, flung open the sliding door, and let him loose. He tore into the forest like a dark rocket, barking and growling fiercely. I'd never seen him so aggressive. He had a shock collar, so he couldn't go too far, but I like to think he scared the guy off for good because I never saw him again after that night. This happened in March 2022, during spring break. I was in my second year of college. 6 of us, my friends and I, decided to rent a cabin in South Carolina for a few days to escape everything. No classes, no stress, no phones. It was meant to be a chill trip, filled with drinking, loud music, and memories to laugh about later. There were 4 guys, me, Matt, Chris, and Tyler, and 2 girls, Jess and Sarah. We'd all been tight since freshman year. The cabin we found was dirt cheap for its size. 2 floors, a wraparound deck, 2 bathrooms, and listed as being on private land near a lake. It was remote, miles from any town, surrounded by dense forest. The owner had a heavy accent and seemed strange over the phone. He just warned, "Don't wander too far into the woods. Old stuff out there, wells, broken fences, snakes, easy to get lost." We chuckled, thinking he was laying on some creepy southern vibe. But when we arrived, it wasn't a joke. The drive was endless. The GPS cut out an hour before we got there. The final stretch was a narrow dirt and gravel path, barely wide enough for our car. The trees grew thicker as we approached. When we finally saw the cabin, we all fell silent. It didn't match the photos. It looked older, grubbier. The windows were grimy and some shutters dangled from their hinges. There was a faint stench outside, like rotting trash mixed with damp wood. We laughed it off, saying it gave the place character. We unpacked, picked rooms, and started drinking by 7 p.m. The first night was a blast. We grilled outside, blasted music from a portable speaker, and played cards. By 11, it got chilly, so we moved indoors. That's when I noticed how dark the woods were. Not just night dark, but an oppressive, total blackness. The porch lights barely reached a few feet, and the trees felt like they were closing in. No crickets, no breeze, just a heavy, unnatural silence. We crashed around 2 a.m. I took a ground floor room near the kitchen, small, with a bed and a window facing the woods. At about 4:15 a.m., I jolted awake for no reason, heart racing. I lay there tense when I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. At first I thought it was the furnace, but it came again. Steady, soft, not mechanical. It sounded like fingernails. I looked at the window and there was a man. He was pressed against the glass, face nearly touching it. Pale, with wild hair, shirtless, just staring. His mouth hung slightly open like he was breathing through it. His eyes were wide, unblinking. He didn't move. He just stood there, tapping slowly like he was toying with me. My body froze. I got up and saw him pointing. There, in the kitchen, was the same man, but now he was inside, completely naked. His back was to us, covered in long, raw scratches. He stood in front of the fridge, staring at it like it was alien. He swayed slowly, rocking on his feet. Matt didn't say a word, just backed away. We all gathered quietly at the hallway entrance. I had a pocket knife. Sarah grabbed the fireplace poker. Chris held a chair leg he'd broken off earlier as a joke. We flipped on the light, and the man was gone. The back door was wide open. Not forced, not broken, just open. We left 20 minutes later. No one argued. We grabbed only essentials, wallets, keys, phones, and drove through the woods until we had enough signal to call the sheriff. We met a deputy at a diner off the highway, and he didn't seem surprised. He asked if anyone was hurt, then said, "Yeah, we've had issues with squatters in those woods. Some not quite right in the head." We tried to explain it wasn't just a vagrant. This guy watched us, returned 2 nights in a row, and somehow got inside. The deputy just nodded, like it was routine. When we mentioned the owner, his expression hinted he knew the guy. The cabin listing vanished a few days later, scrubbed from every rental site. We never got answers or a follow-up call. We didn't even get our deposit back. But that face, the way he stared through the window, still haunts me when I wake up at night. We don't talk about that trip much anymore. As far as I know, none of us have returned to South Carolina since.